Hey folks! Today we set sail to rediscover another cult classic JRPG that I decided to play after putting it off for many years. An epic swashbuckling adventure across the skies of a beautiful world full of wonders to discover, thrilling battles, and many colorful characters to meet and sympathize with. I'm talking about Skies of Arcadia. My first contact with this game was purely coincidental. I was still 18 and bought it by chance at a very low price together with Grandia 2 for the Sega Dreamcast. At the time I didn't know anything about it, but it seemed quite fascinating. However, after finishing Grandia 2, which was my priority, I tried it out only for half an hour. I remember I found it very interesting and full of potential, but I decided to postpone it because in that period I had played enough JRPGs and wanted to move on to something else. Well, a lot of time passed very quickly, and I felt it was time to play it in its entirety. And for the occasion, I even bought this USB adapter for the Dreamcast controller, and then played it via the Flycast emulator on PC. And for this reason, sometimes you'll notice the mouse cursor on the screen, because I forgot to uncheck a recording option. Yes, I'm very smart and careful. I know. Anyway, after so many years of procrastination, I can finally say that the long journey into this world has been indeed the great experience I had always expected. Skies of Arcadia is considered by many one of the finest JRPGs of its era, a great work of passion that showed the potential of the unfortunate Sega Dreamcast, and this can be seen in its sumptuous graphic compartment. See the vast scale of its game world, the care put in its characters' animations, and many other qualities. However, what makes Skies of Arcadia memorable is the narrative and setting, and here I would like to draw a parallel with The Legend of Dragoon. It's like playing an old interactive adventure anime full of classic tropes, where the characters resemble popular archetypes and the authors manage to make them feel alive and likable. On the other hand, there's its original setting. In the world of Arcadia, the skies are the seas and oceans, and the continents and islands are floating land masses. Skies of Arcadia is the story of the young pirate Weiss, his childhood friend Haika, and the mysterious girl Faina. Yes, a lot of you say Fina, but I've always pronounced it Faina, because it should be also the correct pronunciation according to the official transcription. That said, together they'll embark on a journey to discover the mysteries of the world and prevent a catastrophe. A central focus of the game is the theme of travel, of venturing into the unknown in a fantasy recreation of the Age of Exploration, on board flying ships that seem inspired by the works of the late Leiji Matsumoto, author of very influential series, including Space Pirate Captain Harlock, centered on the romantic pirateer in command of the spaceship named Arcadia. I see some inspirations. In the opening scene, we're soon introduced to one of the main antagonists, Admiral Afonso of the Valuan Imperial Armada, intent on capturing an apparently defenseless girl fleeing aboard a peculiar ship. Well, he succeeds, but by pure coincidence, he is suddenly attacked by her pirates, who board his flagship with the intent of plundering it. Leading the assault is our protagonist Weiss, who enters the scene with heroic style, immediately followed by his inseparable friend Haika, and together they start the first fight of the game. Skies of Arcadia features a classic turn-based combat system enriched with some interesting ideas. The first thing I liked is that both heroes and enemies will perform ranged and melee attacks based on positioning. In fact, if they have a clear path towards their target, they'll automatically perform the ranged attack, so as not to waste time at every turn to get close and strike in close range. These first few battles will be pretty simple, but we'll soon discover the game's first obnoxious mechanic: the random encounters. Lots of random encounters. Believe me, the encounter rate of this game, in the Dreamcast version, can be a freaking nightmare. We'll deepen it later. Anyway, our heroes eventually reach Admiral Alfonso, who turns out to be a big piece of shit and a coward, and sends his personal war beast against them. Antonio. See, almost everyone in the Valon Empire, whether person or beast, has a Spanish name. Aside the symbol attacks, the heroes can also cast spells that consume one magic point at a time, and a certain number of spirit points, that are also required to use special moves. The spirit points are generated at each turn, and their number depends from the level of each character. That is, every member of the party contributes to the general pool. The fight against Antonio is a bit tough, and we must avoid letting a character get knocked out, because we'll not be able to resurrect him without the right items or spells. After the end of the boss fight against the beast, we see Alfonso escape cowardly from his ship, leaving behind his remaining army and the prisoner girl, who is taken to safety by Heiken Weiss. Here ends the prologue of the story, and the fate of the world will now depend on this meeting. After the prologue, the saved girl wakes up and meets her saviors, who inform her that she's been saved by her pirates. In return, she thanks them and says that her name is Faina, but then, all confused, she also asks, what are these her pirates? Faina doesn't seem to know much about the world, and it's explained that there are two factions. The Black Pirates who attack everyone without distinction, like true villains, and the Blue Rogues of which the heroes are part, who plunder the warships of the Empire to give their riches to the poor, in true Robin Hood style. Once the introductions are over, Weiss is called on the bridge by his father, Captain Dine, and is given the opportunity to take the helm of the pirate ship, the Albatross, and bring everyone home by navigating the open world. As I said, in this game we travel using airships that can move on any axis. However, we can only descend in specific places, and initially will not be able to go beyond certain altitudes, or through these air walls called sky drifts. Controlling the airship is not complicated, we simply move in every direction using the left analog stick, and then change the altitude with the triggers. But unfortunately there's no minimap. We'll have to access the map with the menu and then use the compass to orient ourselves. In the long run, I found this design choice to be quite annoying to say the least. Perhaps I'm limited, who knows, but many times I got lost very easily, especially in the advanced parts of the game in search of discoveries. In short, in the world of Arcadia there are over 60 secrets to find, each accompanied with a description, which means that in addition to being a simple collectible, discoveries also deepen the lore of the game world, with some being inspired by our real world. And the first can be found on the way home right in the beginning. Most of the discoveries are invisible, but there are also some that are visible or even mobile, and are detected by the compass which begins to rotate quickly. However, I found the most of them by pressing the A button everywhere like crazy. Believe me, it's the best method. Oh yes, in the open world we'll be overwhelmed by random encounters as well, and it's way worse than the dungeons. Way worse. Fucking way worse. Continuing, once we reach Pirate's Isle, we are shown this great cutscene, with an overview of the settlement and its people, followed by the docking of the Albatross in the secret underground base. After getting off, the three protagonists are soon called by Captain Dine to his office, intent on questioning the mysterious girl they rescued. Once there, the captain mentions Faina's somewhat unusual clothes, and will ask her where she came from, and why she was traveling alone. In response, Faina will be determined not to reveal her past, and will declare that she will keep her mission secret even at the cost of her life. Such a resolution impresses Captain Dine, who decides to trust her and welcomes her to the island. Well, Faina's presence on the island will trigger unexpected events, but first we'll experience a period of calm in which to explore the village, know its inhabitants, unlock this special scene, very special indeed, and then witness a moonstone shower during the sunset that will lead Ike and Weiss to leave the island the next day for a little adventure. The next morning, the two adventurers set sail for the nearby Shrine Island, which is a dungeon that takes little time to complete and contains very simple puzzles. They'll find out that the shrine is flooded with water, and they'll have to drain it one floor at a time, and also go through a lot of fighting until they reach the bottom of the ruin and face a not-so-tough boss fight. Once the stone sentinel has been defeated, they'll finally be able to recover the precious moonstone that fell from the sky the night before, and then return home. But unfortunately, it's shown that the Armada has discovered the pirates' secret base and attacked the island with cannons during their absence. Upon their return, they discover that the Empire has bombed the island, then arrested the pirates, and captured Fine as well. The two heroes, knowing that piracy is punished with death, decide not to give up, and prepare to leave the next day on a journey to save their companions. And following this, we'll also learn that the Empire is actually interested in Vina's mission and the information she possesses. The departure of the two young pirates on a seemingly impossible mission marks the beginning of a very long journey full of unexpected events and the encounter with many interesting characters. We can say that the real adventure begins now. In the next part, Weiss and Ike will be engulfed in a huge storm and also have an unpleasant encounter with a gargantuan narquwhale. During this mess, shit goes really wrong, and they'll end up saved by chance by a gruff sea dog with an artificial arm, who welcomes them very coldly. I mean, he fucking punches Weiss in the face. He's quite pissed because they've hindered his hunt for Racnam, the giant narquwhale that just destroyed their boat. Because of this, they'll have to earn his trust, in hope to be escorted to the capital of the Empire. After the initial struggle, the old man will allow Weiss to take the helm of his ship, the Little Jack, and introduce himself as Drachma. Drachma enters the party and fights as a playable character. He's very strong, but also slow, and later introduces the player and the heroes to a new type of battles. That is, the battles between airships, in this case against the black pirate Baltor, who will reappear on several occasions throughout the story. The ship battles are also endurance. They feature animated sequences that make everything spectacular, and will mostly happen in relation to plot events rather than being random encounters. And here I would say, luckily. At every turn, we'll have to assign up to 4 commands, one for each member of the current party. We can attack and use magic, which consumes spirit points, use guard to decrease the received damage, items to repair the ship or receive boosts, and focus for more spirit points in the next turns. A focal point of the ship battles is to understand the colors and icons of the turns in the battle grid. With green, there are no advantages or disadvantages. The sea or chains icon means it will inflict more damages, while yellow indicates that the enemy will have the bonus. At certain points of almost every battle, we'll have to make a sort of strategic decision, which will condition our chances of winning or losing. In fact, the few game overs I had were caused by wrong choices. This first struggle against Baltor is very simple, and ends with him retreating in flames. It was just a tutorial. Anyway, the next ship battles will become more difficult, and with more options. There will be the red turns, in which the enemy will potentially use special attacks that can cause an easy game over. But we'll also get a new icon, indicating we can use our special weapon, that requires a lot of spirit points, but deals tremendous damages. We'll have to learn to strategize a bit, and also pick the right decisions. After some struggles, the party arrives at the gates of the Valan Empire and passes through the Great Fortress. They reach the capital and decide to dock at the lower city port, where Drachma wants to install a new weapon on the Little Jack, which will be decisive for later. The lower city has a gloomy and dirty appearance, and exploring it is very depressing. Furthermore, unexpected things will happen because of a little rascal called Marco, who seems to have heard the protagonist's plan to free the prisoners. We'll see Weiss decide to trust the kid and give him a motivational speech, which makes him a great and charismatic protagonist. After this, the heroes will delve into the sewers to sneak in the Colosseum. Once there, they'll free Weiss's father and the other pirates, who are about to be executed, just in time, and then fight the executioner himself. Afterwards, they go in search of Faina, who they discover is being held prisoner and transported away under guard on a moving train. They'll jump onto the moving wagons and then fight their way through while being chased by Admiral Galcian. Damn, this dude looks terrifying. Once the girl is recovered, everyone will follow the escape on board the Little Jack, and they'll take the opportunity to experiment with the newly assembled special weapon, the Harpoon Cannon, to open a way through the defenses before the giant gate closes. This game is too much spectacular. So, with the liberation of Faina and the pirates, we arrive at the next phase of the story, in which we'll finally know about the girl's origins and her mission. Faina is a descendant of the Silver Civilization, one of the 6 that inhabited the world hundreds of generations before. Each civilization drew power from the moon it stood beneath, and thanks to which they became technologically advanced. But the leaders' thirst for power also led them to build living weapons of mass destruction, called Gigas, and went to war to each other. At a certain point, for unknown reasons, the old world was then destroyed by a rain of destruction, and only a few survived. Faina's mission is to retrieve 5 moon crystals scattered around the world, before they fall into the hands of the Valan Empire, because each crystal gives the power to command its respective Gigas. And previously, Empress Theodora, ruler of Valois, declared that she wants to exhume the Gigas to conquer the world. Color me surprised. Faina will ask to be accompanied on this mission, and obviously, Weiss and Aika will accept. Thus will begin the new chapter in search of the crystals, and the exploration of the world that holds many mysteries and wonders to be discovered. Believe me, a lot of things will happen in this game from this point on. Faina enters the party and presents to the group Cupil, a silver shape-shifting bat that accompanied her since she was little. Cupil acts as Faina's weapon in battle and attacks by shape-shifting into weapons. It can become stronger by feeding it gems, small invisible lunar fragments hidden in the game areas for a total of 30, and which can only be found by relying on the sound signals that the VMU emits when they are nearby. With Captain Dine's approval, the group of heroes sets off aboard the Little Jack. From here, the search for crystals will lead to the discovery and exploration of ruins, like in the desert, which are often dungeons with simple and intuitive puzzles, but will also lead to clashes with a decent cast of antagonists, or against the Gigas themselves. Until now, we've already met Alfonso and partly Galcian, but we'll also meet the charismatic Bellezza, or Bellezza, freaking Spanish, a proud woman willing to compromise if necessary, and later on, Vigoro, Admiral Vigoro, proud fighter and dream of every woman from Valois, an insatiable lover of wild women, who also sports a chiseled jawline and cool haircut that reminds him of something. Vigoro is loved by the authors, who gave him a lot of space, And surely this close-up shot on his pelvis was damn necessary for the plot, as well as this infamous scene. Please. What the heck? Okay, let's not digress too much. Let's focus on the fact that his ship has a large cannon designed to symbolize his extreme virility, or the overcompensation of something.
Bring it on! Take this!
Then there's Admiral De Loco, who's a fucking idiot that we'll meet and fight several times throughout the story, aboard the ship, the Chameleon. Seriously, he's portrayed as a genius designer, a sort of scientist, but all he does is make a fool of himself, and even feigns from excessive hysteria. Fuck this villain, I've never liked him. Apart from dealing with the bad guys, the game focuses a lot on building the relationship between its protagonists. We have Weiss, who is the charismatic hero aiming to become captain of his ship and discover what lies beyond the sunset. There's Saika, who follows him moved by a strong childhood friendship. No particular developments here, but functions very well. And finally there's Faina, who's like a fish out of water, discovering a world she knows very little about. She's the one of the three who undertakes a real growth journey, a bit like Noah from Legend of Legaia, just much less silly. By the way, it's not only about them. We'll also learn to appreciate more Drachma's character, and after an unexpected twist, the group will split. This event leads to a part I appreciated a lot, with the two girls on a side and Weiss on another, stranded on a remote island. Both will get to know new important characters. Heike and Faina will meet an eccentric pirate woman named Clara, who continually chases her lover, a wild pirate who seems to be fleeing from her. While Weiss will get to know Gilder, a slightly womanizing and dandy pirate who'll welcome him on his ship, the Claudia, and accompany him until the reunion of the two girls in a funny succession of coincidences that will end in a curious way. Gilder is my favorite playable secondary character in the game. He has nice dialogue and great charisma. Exploring the world of Arcadia will also lead to meeting and learning about cultures of various kinds, linked to the remote regions in which they are found. To the west, we'll meet some sort of indigenous people, clearly inspired by the South American natives, such as the Incas and the Aztecs. And to get there, we'll have to pass through the very violent storms of the South Oceans. That's a terrible journey. In the east, we'll come into contact with an advanced people with distinctive oriental traits, who have secluded themselves from the rest of the world. To get there, we'll have to make our way through the Dark Rift, an anomaly to navigate like a dungeon with the ship itself. The journey into the Dark Rift, a place full of wrecks symbolizing failed expeditions, is one of those times in which the game felt really immense. At a focal point of the story, Weiss's group comes into possession of a flagship, the Delphinus. Suddenly the game introduces new features, such as being able to manage and expand a secret base. By spending money and advancing in the plot, the base will allow to host people and infrastructures that can be improved. At the same time, we can search around the game world for individuals to hire in the ship's crew, and assign each one their own place to have various types of advantages in battle. The requirements to enlist some characters can be a large sum of money, bring them specific items, have them meet someone who can be listed elsewhere, or have a certain minimum swashbuckling rank, which I'll talk about later. As we advance through the story, we'll also see our ship advance technologically. Initially, the journeys will be limited by natural obstacles, like the sky rifts or the stone rifts, which will then become passable. But the most impressive evolution will be when we can go beyond the maximum altitudes, above the clouds and below the highlands. Not only the journeys will become faster, but there will be no more random encounters. Believe me, I was moved. Now, speaking of other things, the character's growth system is pretty straightforward. At the end of battles, the heroes gain experience points and eventually level up, but they also receive magic experience, which levels up the equipped moonstones or simply colors of weapons. In short, we can change weapons' affinity with an element, even during battles via the item menu or simply by pressing the Y button and scrolling through them freely. There are in total 6 colors, or moonstones, which are obtained throughout the story, but already after the rescuing of Fine and the pirates from Valua we'll have them all. By consulting this image, we can see that each color can deal more damage to another. Red is very effective on purple and vice versa. Blue is efficient on red, and silver and yellow can deal extra damage to each other. Besides, this only counts on the enemies, because the heroes are not affected by the color equipped. Going back to the magic experience, we'll receive points for each moonstone equipped, and if more characters have the same one, then that color will receive more points. In total, each moonstone has 6 learnable spells, and I found very useful to use the support magics that increase the party members' attack or speed, because they make a huge difference in boss fights. Even during the air battles, we'll be able to use the attack and support magic, not to mention healing, because, for reasons, our ship can heal from damage like a living being. Well, okay. Surprisingly, unlike those on foot, the majority of bosses of ship battles are weak to status changes, thus decreasing their stats with the spell Dryon will be very useful. Aside from spells, there are also super moves, which are special attacks that only consume spirit points. To acquire them, we'll have to consume a certain number of items called moonberries for each character, which are dropped by some bosses or very rarely by common enemies. We can also find them in chests scattered around. These powers are very useful in battles, and I'm not joking that we'll abuse Ofika's moves, which are all based on the fire element. I kid you not, since the first hours of the game, the first action of almost every battle will be to use her super moves to quickly clear out groups of enemies.
Fire consume my enemies! Slam to burst!
This thing has become a kind of meme, and there's even a fun animation that parodies it. And apart from Aika, especially during boss battles, we'll also overuse Vice's Cutlass Fury, and surprisingly Fine has one that allows to petrify some bosses for a few turns. To be honest, the game becomes pretty simple, though I have to admit that not having inventory limits helps a lot. You know, games like The Legend of Dragoon, which feature limited inventories, can lead to a bit of strategizing and not abusing hundreds of healing items. Okay. The Legend of Dragoon's inventory system, with its only 32 slots, was terrible. Maybe not the best example, but I think I give you the idea. I was saying, after some initial struggles, Skies of Arcadia turned out to be a fairly simple game, and I risked game overs against enemies who inflicted status death with their spells, In fact, I never had any game overs. I really don't know what the game over screen looks like. In truth, the only 2 or 3 game overs I had, if they can be defined as such, were during some ship battles, due to wrong strategic choices I already mentioned, but then the battle simply started again as if nothing had happened. As I said, the navigation of the open world feels a bit clunky. It's easy to get lost without the minimap, and constantly opening the world map via the menu becomes unnerving, but I don't want to count it as a major flaw. On the other hand, I had trouble finding many discoveries, whose descriptions available at the guild are very vague, and I admit that I have resorted on some guides from time to time. A curious thing about the discoveries is that initially there will be a sort of rivalry between Weiss and the NPC called Domingo. If certain discoveries are not found before some story events, they will be marked as already found by him and the money reward will be much lower. Furthermore, Domingo can be recruited after finding at least 30 discoveries, after which he will stop being a nuisance and will give rewards for every certain number of findings, including the accessory that reduces random encounters after just 50. Well, better late than never. Now, before I start with the next complaints, I would like to say that I wish I had known about the differences with the GameCube port much earlier. Unfortunately, only when I finished the first game disc, I read by chance about the adjustments and additions that were made for the GameCube version, released in 2002 and renamed Skies of Arcadia Legends. As I complained at the beginning, this game suffers from an atrocious encounter rate. I'm not joking that a fight can start even after just few steps, or 1 meter in the open world where the situation is much worse. The GameCube version kinda fixes this problem, reducing the encounter rate here and there, and giving more experience points to compensate. However, I read some contrary opinions, according to which the difference is minimal, and that faster loading times give the illusion of less encounters. I admit that many times I was happy to be able to speed up the game on the emulator, because certain parts, like the infamous South Ocean, make the experience truly unbearable. Yes, I'm fucking spoiled, I know. Another thing revised, or rather expanded, is the swashbuckler rating system. In short, in the game there's an hidden scoring system that takes into account the right choices made in many dialogues during the story, or how many battles have been won. In the Dreamcast version, a minimum rank is required just to enlist the blacksmith Ryukan, who can then create Weiss's final weapon if the right materials are found. Aside that, the ranks are rather symbolic. On GameCube instead, there are various special ranks obtainable by satisfying certain prerequisites, and the final one, Weiss the Legend, requires almost 100% completion, which means a lot of time and patience to invest. I don't know you, but personally I've never been a fan of completionism. One problem with this scoring system is that it drops quickly when you run away from battles, and you have to win a lot of them to get it back up. Believe me, the temptation to flee from battles will be very high, but if you want that blacksmith in the crew, you'll have to grit your teeth, pick all the right choices, and never flee from a fight. Other interesting additions of this version are the bounty battles, then a sort of super boss, and the inclusion on disc of the Dreamcast downloadable contents. Practically, on Dreamcast it was possible to download some extras, such as a new area, a secret boss to face with the airship, and some purchasable items. Well, without that downloadable area, it's not possible to find all the gems to grow Cupil to the 100% of its potential, and I would also have liked to face that optional boss. Continuing, there are 24 new discoveries, and a minigame called Pinda's Quest, playable on the Dreamcast VMU, was omitted, and I didn't have the chance to try it on the emulator. In contrast to these nice additions, I read that this port has some flaws, like some graphic elements that are better on Dreamcast, and a worsened audio quality of the fantastic soundtrack. However, this GameCube version is considered a director's cut, and I really regret not playing it. Beyond everything I've complained about, Skies of Arcadia is still an extraordinary work that counted on the passion of respectable authors, including the late Reiko Kodama, who also worked in the past on projects like the Phantasy Star series. You'll find in the description a link to a subtitled interview with Fair and Shuntaro Tanaka, in which they talk about every aspect of the game, so beware spoilers. Skies of Arcadia is a graphically stunning game for its time. I think that in 2000, while the PS1 was releasing the latest Swansong classics, seeing this game was like admiring the next gen of the time. I loved seeing the care put into details everywhere. Almost all the NPCs have unique models and some nice animations, like this seller that says goodbye with a kiss. Entering buildings doesn't show loading screens, and even the immense open world has none. I was also impressed by the characters' facial expressions, both during the cutscenes and in the battles when they perform symbol attacks and special moves, or while taking hits. The enemies, and especially the bosses, are also well animated, and I liked seeing their pose change when they're low on HPs. What struck me the most were the airship battles, also because I knew nothing about them before playing the game. They have such an epic feel thanks to the script movements and the camera changes. Some bosses are incredible to say the least, with special attacks that have great impact. In particular, I loved this Draconic Gigas, which seems to come from Panzer Dragoon Saga. Yes, that's one of my favorite JRPGs. Perhaps I'll cover it in a very distant future. Sure, many attack animations and moves can be time-consuming, but at least the super moves can be skipped on Dreamcast by pressing the start button. As I always say, those were different times, and such things, even if long, were somewhat the norm. One last thing I would like to mention is that I found the lack of full motion videos, which were very popular at the time, very curious if not unique. Just think of the Squaresoft productions that made it a trademark. This game just relies on its own engine for everything, and then the cutscenes are very engaging. And to top it off, there's a beautiful soundtrack by Yukata Minobe and Tatsuyuki Maeda. I think there's nothing to complain about their work, and I would also like to mention the dynamic music during battles among the merits. Perhaps it's one of the first examples of such feature.
Let's try this. Moons, give me strength.
Between an epic battle and a mysterious rune to explore, the overall story will always be quite thrilling, and will show some very nice and emotional twists that will make the adventure memorable. The chemistry between the cast of main and secondary characters will help to keep the emphasis high during the most important scenes, and the final part kinda resolves all the fundamental questions, and becomes very choral. It all ends with a grand finale that I appreciated very much, though something didn't fully convince me along the way, but these are minor details. However, this brings us to point out something I wasn't expecting. Skies of Arcadia has some good dialogue overall, the story makes sense, but after I finished the game I discovered that the two translators took great liberties with the general adaptation. From this interview, the two translators Clayton Vorlick and Chris Lusich practically rewrote almost all the dialogues as they saw fit, avoiding altering the story. They also changed the names of many NPCs to acquaintances or people from the QA department, not to mention Vice's final weapon named after Vorlick himself, and so on. Reading this, I felt dismayed. Now, it's not my intention to defame the work of others, but I feel something wrong in all this, and who knows how many other translations received the same treatment. And beyond the liberty in translation, Skies of Arcadia has also some banal censorship. In this world, you don't drink alcohol of any kind, but a generic loqua, and some characters who smoke cigars find themselves with nothing in their mouths. There's a scene towards the end with some blood that has been removed, but it's nothing symbolic that loses meaning like a certain scene from Xenosaga Episode 3. Let's say I still have other minor complaints about censorship, but I'd like to conclude by saying that the English dub is, well, passable. The original Japanese cast has big names like Norio Wakamoto and Tomokazu Seki, which are some of my favorites, but the English voice actors are still listenable, and after all, the game has very few dubbed lines, almost all during the fights. Oh yes, it was funny to discover that Vigoro is voiced by Charles Martinet. Cool. Skies of Arcadia was a beautiful adventure that reminded me a lot of Grandia for the great sense of discovery and the liveliness of its cast, but unfortunately it doesn't dare very much in proposing innovative mechanics. On the gameplay side, it hasn't aged very well. The exploration of the dungeons is very classic without particular creativity. The turn-based combat system is, well, pretty slow, although with some nice ideas, and the random encounters are often too excessive. Yes, I know I'm repetitive. Though I appreciated the small management part of the ship's crew, and the development of the base which allows a bit of customization. Between merits and flaws, it remains a monumental work that boasts a beautiful and inspired setting, in which to experience an adventure as simple as it is emotional, enriched by many homages to animation and literature. Unluckily, it gives me the impression of having remained a niche product, not celebrated enough or loved by too many people, and that's a shame. Perhaps the much talked about remaster, with the necessary improvements, could finally make it the popular classic it should be. To conclude, I hope that with this long video I've aroused someone's interest, perhaps encouraging them to try it in its GameCube version. It's a delightful, yet flawed classic that must be experienced if you love the genre. As always, a warm thanks to all viewers, and see you in the next entry.